Hey, this is John Lee Dumas, the founder and host of Entrepreneurs on Fire. And if you're wanting to learn how to embrace change and navigate through disruption as a leader, then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend, Denis. He's prepared to ignite.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis Jnr.
Hey, welcome to the show, Leadership is Changing. What we, as leaders, know to be true is that change is constant. Leaders everywhere confront similar obstacles because people are people, but everywhere you go, leaders are overwhelmed, disrupted, and under pressure. They run from email to email, meeting to meeting. Many leaders are not changing quick enough, which means they run the risk of becoming irrelevant and being left behind. The purpose of the show is taking our listeners' leadership to another level by finding their balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. I believe we don't have enough effective leaders in the world today, and if we can get the leaders to step up and lead change, then they can inspire real change. Hey listeners, it's now time to adapt in our fast-moving world. And I want to welcome you to today's episode. Today's another mashup that I'm bringing to you, which is fantastic. And as you know, the podcast is going on just about 11 months, and tremendous support, of course, and great feedback coming from listeners and for those who are involved in being interviewed and etc. Hey team, if you haven't already checked out episode 00, go to that one and listen to it's a very small episode. It's the introduction episode, and it's about my story and why I started this podcast. If you haven't already checked out the Facebook group or the LinkedIn page, which is Leadership is Changing, because about the podcast, we would love to see you there because we've got a great group of people who have joined the community there and love to see you there as well. Well, as I said, I've been bringing you some episodes, some great people, superb people, and today we've got another 4 superb people that I've interviewed as well. So we're going to have this on this episode, and it's Steve Papps Jnr. He comes from episode 14. He's the founder of Generation Dad Bod, does a lot of work with people who are wanting to get fit, lose weight, become the dad that they want to be. Next guest is Richard Barnett, or we call him Richie Barnett. He's an international rugby league star and leader, and he's on episode 17. Kate Erickson from episode 23. She runs a podcast with a guy called John Lee Dumas called Entrepreneurs on Fire, and it's just recently been listed as the top 10 business podcast for you to check out for 2021, and it's absolutely fantastic. The final guest on this episode, this mashup, is Jo Finer. She is from episode 25, and she's got over 27 years in the agribusiness. That's the agricultural business. And one thing with Jo is that she spoke at the United Nations of Women in Leadership from the agriculture business side of things, and it's really wonderful. So 4 great people. What I'd like you to do, listeners, is just sit back, relax, enjoy the mashup, take heaps of notes. Otherwise, enjoy. Hey, so leadership is changing, and we're seeing change is constant in that. So what is that, when I say that term, what does that mean for you?
I think, given the current circumstances globally, we've been through COVID-19. We've now got this whole global racism talk around America, what's happened recently as well. So I think people are wanting leaders who actually step up to the plate. You know, it's not like before where you can kind of hide behind the covers. Now you've actually got celebrities who are coming out and actually saying, where's our leader? For example, in the States, you know, you've got Dwayne Johnson who publicly posted that on social media. Where is our leader? And in that respect, I think that's what people are wanting, not leaders who are just move pieces around, but actually say, no, this is what we're doing, this is the vision, this is how we're going to actually move forward.
Yeah, and if that's lacking, so it's a really interesting point. So what people are looking for, what I'm hearing you saying is that people are looking for a strong leader to follow, a strong leader that will be standing up front, as you said, stands up to the plate or comes up to the plate and gets ready. They are somebody who's going to take them forward, lead them, have the vision, but also be that person that people will want to grab onto. Now, if that's a void, in other words, if it's missing and people are not being communicated, not giving the messages that they need and that to help them go forward, they'll make it up. Or they'll go and fill that void themselves. And so things here is really important. And so people are asking, actually, they're not even asking, they're screaming out for it right now, I think, and that's what they're looking for, which is really, really important. So, yeah, leadership is changing, and people are saying, hey, we need to change, and we're looking for change, and we are changing. We want the right leaders up front there with us as well.
Definitely.
That's really good to see. Hey, the title of the show is Leadership is Changing. When I say that statement, what does that mean for you?
I think it's... I see it as a visionary statement. It means we have to, we all have leadership styles that really suit. And I think if you can broaden that range, like for instance, if you're a visionary, like Jobs, he thought very big picture stuff, but he wasn't the one that was data driven and structured. He got other people to do that, but he had a vision that was compelling. So you need people like that. For me, change is understanding the essence of why you're doing it. Why? What are you trying to achieve from being a leader in this current day when things are uncertain? You're trying to influence people in uncertain times when people are stressed, asking for more, when sometimes you're not that person that's delivering it. So when you look at, what is it? So you got a commanding leadership, which is obviously necessary at times that we need a split decision real quick. I think we need those style of leaders. I'm more affiliate leader, like affiliate leadership sort of model, where I like to bring people together, build trust, a sense of belonging, and use communication to really drive that person to deliver the results. That's my style. And what your question is that we've got to be diverse in understanding that whole picture, because we're not all one. And if we can bring diverse thinkers into it, because I think that's the essence of solving what our current situation is. We need people to be diverse. And if you can bring people in that have a different way of thinking to solve a problem, then I think we need to be diverse in the way we think. The brain operates differently. We need a balanced approach.
I mean, heck, Richie, it'd be just great for them to think, full stop, eh? I mean, that'd be a good start. But I think that you're right. I mean, the diversity side of things, brilliant. So if I take an analogy of a sporting side of things, right, and you've got players who have all got different positions, but if there's a player in there that understands all positions and understands how everyone works and understands everyone's strengths and what they do in their roles, and they can bring that forward to help everyone be the best that they can be, I think that's a skill that's really great. And so leading that change would be fantastic.
Yeah, 100%, Dennis. And I think it's not only on the field or in workplaces. I think what the method is now is to go deeper than that, go deeper behind who they are and what makes them tick. What is their family problems like? Because that influences the way people operate at workplaces and on the field of sport. There's just more behind the iceberg effect, I guess, where, look, we're seeing the results, but underlying that, there's a lot of other things that accommodate the pinnacle of that iceberg. And I think if we're savvy enough, if we're smart enough, if we have curiosity around thinking, and that's asking more questions and not being afraid of that. We just did a podcast just recently around psychological safety, and I think that's very important. Google just did, in 2017, they did a research around 187 companies, and the top of the list was psychological safety. And we're delving into that. We had a really good podcast about what that actually means. And if you're safe to question in an environment, and we spoke about that before, it's very rare you see that. It's very rare that I've seen in meetings and companies that they've actually asked a lot of questions and people actually are privy to open up about how they feel, particularly if you're an extrovert or introvert. You're not going to say much if you're introvert, but they've actually got so much knowledge sitting there, but the questions never asked about being safe enough to explore that and ask questions. I've never been in it where you've got a meeting and they go, well, is there anything that you guys would suggest that we could improve the current situation? I've never been in that environment. It's
But
crazy.
that's a powerful question, right? And if you give people the space to be able to say that, and I mean, not just ask the question, but for them to actually respond, just imagine what might come up.
And that's the art of questioning. You know, we're asking the wrong questions. Most of the time, you know, sometimes we do the loop questions, or we're hypnotized in most cases of asking the same stupid question over and over again and getting the same result. I think we really are hypnotized, I think, to be brutally fair in today. We've heard it all before. What do you think? Why can't I do this? I'm not sure if I can. So that's a limitation.
Yeah.
Instead of asking and being curious about opening the door to the mind and going, what else does that mean? How can we change it? You know, there's certain things that we're questioning the same thing often enough, but we're not actually coming up with the right questions to get better answers. Our brain's like a computer. What you input in, you'll get out. So be smart.
So we used to talk about this in computer programming days, GIGO, which is garbage in, garbage out. So it's the same thing, you know, depending what you go into your mind, it depends what comes out as well, for sure. Hey, the name of the show is Leadership is Changing, and we know we're in a constant change all the time. That is what's constant, is change. So what does that mean for you, leadership is changing?
You know, when I was thinking, when I think about the change, I can't help but consider technology and our visibility as like everyday human beings and how that's evolving every single day. I think there's a new visibility to leadership that maybe a lot of people are just now stepping into. Again, it hasn't been around for that long, I guess, when all things considered. And so when I think of leadership and showing up and being vulnerable and, you know, initiating change and having people respect and trust you and all of these different aspects, like it's one thing to be able to write well and to inspire people that way. It's one thing to come onto TV and inspire. It's one thing to stand in front of a room and give a speech or something like that and be able to motivate people to want the change that you're talking about. But when you can do that in your everyday life, just as a human, without putting on the show of leadership, I think that there's something so powerful in that. And so I feel like leaders are being called to a new level of authenticity, of vulnerability, of real life that maybe hasn't been there for very long. And I very highly respect when I follow someone online, or, you know, I've never had an opportunity to chat with them personally, to see and to feel the same person that I've been following from afar show up in real life. And I think that that's quite unique in a lot of areas.
Yeah, it's almost like people put a mask on to be something else, and then it comes through that that's not who they are.
Exactly.
And so they're not, and that word you used just before about being authentic, then they are not authentic. And so it's a bit disappointing when you see somebody who doesn't show up to be the person that they're out there portraying. So yeah, I think you're right. And the new level of authenticity, vulnerability, and that new life and the way that leaders coming through, yeah, really interesting to see where that all goes for sure.
Yeah. And Denis, I'm sure that you've experienced, I mean, I certainly have. And it's really disappointing to look up to somebody and to follow someone and then to meet them in person and realize like, maybe this isn't so much of somebody that I want to be following or looking up to, you know, having seen another side of them, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Joe, I used, or the name of the show is called Leadership is Changing. And when I say that term, what does that mean for you?
Flexibility. Changing means being flexible. And I guess, you know, I've, watched a fair bit of change in my 30-year career in the primary sector. You know, I was referring before to talking about empowering women in agribusiness. Certainly the role of women 30 years ago when I started in the manufacturing part of the food sector was somewhat challenging. And, you know, it was, had to be fairly tough, and had to bear a little bit of attitudes and approaches that these days are just no longer acceptable. And it's great to see that has changed, but it's what it's meant is, for me, I've had to be flexible and move from that particular style that I had to employ at that time to what is now probably a very different style where, you know, 30 years on, there's, a couple of generations of, coming through behind who want different things out of the workplace. I think we've learnt as managers, as leaders, and as employees that we need more balance in our life. And so learning how to manage that kind of, work life balance and adapting to that. And then, just being flexible, I think, also to the changing consumer needs, particularly around the, issues of sustainability, issues of health and safety. For us in the primary sector, things like, animal welfare, fresh water, carbon emissions, that they've all had a huge impact on the way that we lead and what's important. So being flexible to just listen and to understand where, what's moving around you and how you need to adapt to those changes.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's not just with your team, it's being flexible in all areas of business and in life. So it sounds like, even with your consumers, your customers, your stakeholders, people out there, but even home life. I mean, if you can be flexible around that space too, that's going to be really important. And I like what you say, that change means having more flexibility. So being flexible is the key word there for sure. Hey, listeners, I hope you really enjoyed our 4 superb guests on this episode of this Mashup. It's just wonderful to hear their insights that they are sharing with us. Hey, once again, if you haven't already checked out episode 00, go ahead and do that. That's the introduction episode to the podcast when we launched that just on 11 months ago. And have a listen to that. And also, if you haven't already checked out the Facebook group or the LinkedIn page, Leadership is Changing, we'd love to see you there, which is fantastic. So, listeners, what we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Change is incredibly scary, especially with the unknown and the unfamiliar territory. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing. Hey, look out for the episodes as they're being released. Have a listen, download them and have a listen, put a review and a rating. Share them with your friends, your family, and your network. The other thing here is that if you've got any feedback for me about the show, or if there's a question you want me to ask my guests as I interview them, or if you have a question for the Ask Denis Freestyle episode that happens once a week, feel free to send me an email, dennis@leadingchangepartners.com. All right, team, great to have you with us. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Jnr. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.